almost 8 months ago, I did my first rewatch in decades of the hit Julia Roberts classic, My Best Friend's Wedding. And I distinctly remember getting to the point in the movie when Michael decided that the best, most platonic way for him to get his ring off of his best friend's finger was by wrapping his mouth around said digits and sucking it off. And I was like, in what universe is that platonic, you dumb piece of shit, Michael? Like, God, that movie was messy. And after I finished my rewatch, I walked away convinced that no other rom-com would ever reach that level of a mess. But boy, oh boy, was I wrong. Because imagine me and you was like, hold my beer. I will raise you your sexual tension ring for a you're wanker number 9. Now, I will have you know that I do have a loud, booming voice, perfectly fit for yelling loud enough to be heard several streets over. But I was not about to blow out your eardrums, hence why I practiced some restraint. So, you're welcome. Also, unlike My Best Friend's Wedding, which was a rewatch for me, this is my first time watching Imagine Me and You, which took the whole why should the straights be the only ones who get a messy ass rom-com seriously, and as such, it made a perfect fit for Romcom Ganda Tuesday. Now, for those just finding my channel or who are just stumbling on this series for the first time, Romcom Ganda Tuesday is a weekly video series I have on my channel that often drops on Tuesdays. Ignore the fact that you're seeing this on a Wednesday and just roll with it. Whereby I pick a rom-com from the late 80s to the mid 2010s. Often it's a rewatch. On rare occasions, it can be a first-time watch. Either way, I watch the film and analyze it to see how well it holds up years later, especially viewing them through my now adult and slightly more cynical lens. Now, if this is your first time discovering this series, kindly note that I usually split these videos into 3 parts. The intro, which was what you're watching right now, the synopsis of the movie, and finally my thoughts. As such, I will have timestamps put in so you can navigate it as you so choose. Now, before I move on to the synopsis part of the video, I would like to say a big thank you to my lovely patrons and YouTube members whose support have been instrumental in helping me continue to make content, especially since I started doing this full-time at the start of last year, which was the last time I was in paid employment. And a special shout out to Kat, Lina, Sherry, and Holly for their extra support. You get all the hearts and kisses to mwah. If you too would like to support me on Patreon or become a YouTube member to enjoy certain perks, maybe even get a shout out, the link to do so is in the description bar. And with that said, Imagine Me and You opens on a wedding day. Heck, short for Hector, played by Matthew Good, is about to marry Piper Parabo's Rachel. And as the bride is preparing to head to the venue, she is trailed by her father, Ned, played brilliantly by Anthony Head, R.I.P., and her mother, Tess, played by the Celia Imrie. Interestingly enough, Ned is the one with the wedding jitters, whilst Rachel is pretty breezy about her big day. Whilst all of this is happening, we cut to flower shop owner Cersei Lannister. Sorry, I meant Luce, who is the vendor catering to Ek and Rachel's wedding and makes her appearance. She catches the attention of Ek's best friend, Coop, the best man, who believes that there is some sort of connection between Luce and himself. Spoiler alert. There most certainly is not. And Rachel's much younger sister, H. Her teacher thinks H is short for Henrietta, but H notes that it's short for Jesus H. Christ, which was what her mother had said when she learned that she was pregnant with her. I mean, when you consider the age difference between Rachel and H, I can understand why that was Tess's response. Anyway, H immediately takes a liking to Luce, who is the only one that could explain the irresistible force paradox, i.e. what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. Luce's response to H that it's a trick question delights her, who chooses to sit beside her new best friend when they make it to the wedding chapel. Rachel arrives with her father, and as he walks her down the aisle, her eyes meet Luce's and they have a visible moment which... Can anyone really blame her though? I would react the same way if my eyes met Cersei Lannister. Of course, if you swapped Cersei for Marjorie Tyrell, I would have ended that almost wedding right there and eloped with her immediately. It's Natalie Dormer. Unfortunately, that would have meant that there will be no actual movie, so Rachel continues her trek to the front of the chapel and is instead married to Eck. At her reception, Rachel runs into Luce again. Luce wants to get to the punch behind Rachel, but Rachel tries discouraging her, then explains that her ring had fallen into the punch bowl when she was trying to get a drink, and Rachel is trying everything but cannot locate it. Clearly, even the universe itself has stepped in at this point to try and show Rachel the signs just how much her marriage to Eck cannot possibly last, but my girl is still missing all the clues. Anyway, Luce helps Rachel by hiding behind her and sticking her hand into the punch bowl. Whilst Rachel is chatting with X's sleazy boss Rob, Luce is not only able to feel her way to the ring, but she also slips said ring onto Rachel's finger, with Rob none the wiser, and then proceeds to shake Rob's hands with the same hand that had moments ago been buried in the punch bowl, which serves Rob's sleazy ass right, but also had me commiserating with whichever unfortunate soul would grab a glass from that bowl, unaware that Luce had been rooting about in and rearranging said bowl's guts just moments prior. Now, sometimes past how much time it actually is, we don't really know, as the film is never really clear about the timeline of events, but time does pass and Rachel shows up at Luce's shop to invite her to dinner, and she volunteers Eck to cook, even though she and Eck know that her husband is absolutely pants at cooking. Anyway, as she tells Eck, her plan is to set up Luce with Coop, with the hope that this would bring Luce into their lives and she would get the chance to be extra close to this woman she's drawn to and believes is her soulmate in her, in a platonic way. Which, to be fair, which baby queer hasn't had that moment when you meet someone and you think that what you're feeling is you wanting them to be your best friend, unaware that what you're feeling is certainly not friendship, nor is it platonic. Anyway, Rachel is plotting her way into becoming a quartet with Luce, Coop, and Heck. Unfortunately for her, however, Luce is merely amused by all of Coop's attempts and isn't interested, as moments before Coop had shown up, Luce had let it slip to Heck that she is very much a lesbian. Rachel continues to be in the dark, and sometime during dinner, she and Luce get into an argument about love at first sight. Rachel believes love is something that you grow into and that it takes a while to find the right person for you. And Luce is strictly team, when you're in love, you will know it, because she's a big believer in love at first sight. Now, after the dinner, Coop drives Luce home, where she reiterates to him that she's very much gay and not interested in him, although Cooper still believes he has a chance at getting her to change her mind. What a delusional fowl. Coop eventually notices that something seems to be off with Luce, and after stopping so that he can get a drink, he finally gets her to talk to him, and she admits that she has feelings for someone who is with someone else. Cooper doesn't think this is a big deal and suggests that she go for it, since as far as he is concerned, whatever arises is between the person and their partner that they cheated on with him. But Luce insists that is not her, and she doesn't want to get in between another couple. Now, the next day sees Heck and Rachel at the grocery store. Rachel is still dreaming about potentially getting Coop and Luce together, and just as Heck is about to break the news about Luce being very much gay to his oblivious wife, they run into Luce with the hot as hell Evie. Call me Evie! All four of them have a moment, and it's quite clear to those of us watching that Rachel is very much jealous, although she doesn't actually know that that is what she's feeling. And of course, Heck finally gets the chance to inform her to say sayonara to her plans of hooking Rachel up with Coop, since Rachel is very much gay. When they run into Luce and Edie yet again as they're navigating the store, Heck finally acts as if Luce and Edie are a couple, and they both immediately deny this, with Edie doing a sing-song that Luce is in love with someone else. I repeat, Edie, call me. Even more time passes, and Eck, who has to go in for work, decides to use the opportunity to set up Rachel with Luce so the latter can keep his wife company at the football game that he was meant to attend with Rachel and now can't because of work reasons. Luce really isn't a football girly, but she does teach Rachel how to belt out the iconic "You're wanker number 9." And afterwards, they both head to the arcade for some dancing. As they wrap up the night and head back to Rachel's flat, Rachel leans in to kiss Luce, but stops at the very last minute and heads inside alone. This happens on Luce's birthday, by the way. Rachel's feelings for Luce continues to grow, and she finds herself hallucinating kissing her at the science presentation that H holds in her class, to which she invited her family and Luce, since Luce had helped H with said presentation. Eventually, Rachel has had enough and goes to Luce's shop to confront her. Luce pulls Rachel into the back room for some privacy, and Rachel vents at her, then insists that nothing romantic can happen between them, and then follows it up by kissing Luce. Luce kisses her back, and the two get hot and heavy for a moment until Heck walks into the store and calls out to Luce. Remember, they are in the back room. This effectively pours cold water on the two women, and Luce steps out to attend to Heck, who is there to buy Rachel flowers. Her favorite, actually. Lilies. And whilst he's there, he takes the opportunity to ask Luce if Rachel had ever talked to her about their marriage, since he feels that something is wrong and he wants to know what he can do to fix it. Luce says she doesn't know, but suggests that Ek talk to Rachel about it, and he mentions his fears to her that if he addresses it with Rachel, then there's a likely possibility that Rachel might confirm that there really is something wrong. After Heck leaves, Luce chases after Rachel, who had run away at this point, and Rachel points out that they cannot do this, hurt Heck in this manner, to which Luce agrees. Meanwhile, Heck quits his job working for a piece of shit Rob and goes to get sloshed in celebration. When he gets home, drunk out of his ass but hydrating in order to avert the hangover and try and sober himself up, Rachel approaches him to talk. Heck then lays down on the sofa, and Rachel proceeds to confess about her feelings for someone else and how she's working to stay with Heck regardless. By the time she turns around, she finds to her dismay that Heck is asleep and leaves, unaware that he was awake all this while and now very much sober, but was merely pretending to be asleep. He then calls Coop, who immediately puts it together that the person that Rachel probably is in love with is Luce due to their earlier conversation, goes to Luce's shop to confront her, calling her a hypocrite and a whore. Oh, shut up, Cooper. You're one to talk. Ugh. Luce decides that she cannot continue to do this, be around Rachel while she's married to Heck and risking hurting Heck, which isn't something that Luce wants to do. She decides to take a long holiday out of the country and leaves the care of a flower shop to her mother. A couple of days later, it's Rachel's birthday, and although initially celebratory, Rachel's reaction to H mentioning that Luce is going to be gone for a very long time clues him into the fact that Luce is the one that Rachel is in love with. He tells Rachel that they cannot continue to do this and that he cannot bear to have her stay when she loves someone else, and encourages her to go after Luce. Rachel then confesses to her parents that she's in love with another woman, and when her father encourages her to chase after the person she loves, Rachel does just that. But when she gets to the flower shop, Luce's mother informs her that Luce is gone. Rachel then tells her that she's left her husband and wants to be with Luce, and Luce's mother responds by handing over the care of the shop to a customer. And together, all four of them chase after Luce. I'm like, ma'am, do you even know that woman? What if she runs? Anyway, Luce, meanwhile, is stuck in traffic, the very same traffic that Rachel finds herself caught in, although neither are aware of this at first. Rachel then calls Luce, but Luce doesn't even hear her out and cuts the call. Rachel, who for that brief moment when Luce had picked up, had heard a rider humming a song, realizes when that very same rider passes by that they are caught in the same traffic jam, gets out of the car and belts out the iconic "You're Wanga number 9" to get Luce's attention. Luce steps out and the two of them meet in the middle of traffic and they kiss. The post-credit scene sees the characters after some time has passed. Heck is on a plane seated beside a woman with whom he has an instant connection. Hi, Gwen. H continues to very much be in puppy love with her boyfriend as they play together on the playground. Coop is holding a baby, an actual baby, and Luce and Rachel are still happy and in love together. The end. Now, I have to admit that for most of my watch time of this movie, every time the camera panned over to Piper Perabo's Rachel, I alternated between thinking she looked just like Rachel McAdams, and then the angle would shift and she'll be giving me Jennifer Garner, which was all a mind fuck whilst I was watching this film, mind you. And it went perfectly hand in hand with the feeling of messiness I got from the plot itself. Because say what you will, but this movie was messy between the cheating storyline, which I will come back to in a moment, and the fact that the movie at its core is trying to emphasize how messy love itself is. I think it finds a way to work. From the very beginning, when we see Rachel heading to the church to be married to Heck with her father, once again, R.I.P. Anthony Heard, God's. Watching this movie and seeing him just made my heart break, especially since I watched it in the same week that we got the news of his passing. God, it hurts. But as I was saying, from the start, when Rachel's father was giving commentary about his own wedding day and how he wished he hadn't followed through with it and had taken the chance to bail when it was provided to him, we already got the inkling that this was not going to be your stereotypical romance story. And we were right. Rachel gets in, locks eyes with her wedding florist as she's walking down the aisle to be married to Ek, and it immediately clicks that, oh damn, she just fell in love at first sight moments before she's to say I do. And the one she loves is not her husband. It's given, don't let your husband keep you from meeting your wife, which is just wild. But according to the story, that is unfortunately how love works. You cannot control it. You cannot predict it. And as Luce and Rachel find out over the course of the movie, you cannot resist it either. It says a lot that there is Rachel who feels this connection to Luce and believes that it's because she really wants her to be a friend, this new soulmate she's met, courtesy of her wedding day. And so she tries to set Luce up with Cooper, ex-best friend. Cooper, who in the immortal words of Rachel's mom, would fuck an open wound. God, Celia Emery's delivery of that line was just chef's kiss. Cooper cannot read the bloody room. Rachel's body language makes it pretty clear that she's not interested in his ass. And when she even comes out to tell the dude that she's a lesbian and is most certainly not interested in him, he continues to push, trying to convince her. Did I roll my eyes at his antic? Did I roll my eyes a ton at his antics? Yes, I did. Was it a pretty accurate depiction of how the larger society, especially men, tend to treat femme-presenting lesbians, messy though it is? Yes. Did I think Coop had a lot of nerve calling Luce a whore for what went down between her and Rachel, especially considering that Ito had admitted that he has hooked up with married people before? Yes. Do I think that, hypocritical though he was in that moment, he was lashing out because his best friend was hurt and reeling from what the discovery that his wife is in love with someone else is doing to him? Yes. If there's anything I can say about Imagine Me and You, whilst at its core, it is a romantic comedy with some pretty hilarious moments, I've got thorns in my ass. It still does manage to bring a level of believability to all the characters. Luce is caught between her desire for Rachel, this person that she felt an instant connection to, and has been finding herself drawn to her in the moments that they meet afterwards, and her guilt about what is happening being morally wrong because she doesn't want to be that woman, as she tells Coop. She doesn't want to be the one who comes between a married couple, and she holds on to that conviction for as long as she can, until Rachel shows up at the shop and one moment leads to the next and they are kissing, and then X shows up to buy his wife's flowers. I mean, I watched that scene and just wanted to sink into the floor because it was a whole ass mess. I also find the state of disarray that both Rachel and Luce were in when Ek walks into the shop an accurate metaphor for everything that was happening. Did I spend way too many moments hitting pause on my television to yell, "Get your shit together" at my screen? Yes, I did. And like I stated at the start of this video, the cheating storyline is one that harkens back to My Best Friend's Wedding for me. And whilst with My Best Friend's Wedding, I was irritated to no end and wished that both Jules and Kimmy had left Michael's self-absorbed, double-dealing, wishy-washy, wants to have his cake and eat it too ass behind. With Imagine Me and You, I was rooting for Luce to get her happy ending, for Rachel to live her truth, and for Heck to get a chance at his own happiness as well, because God's, I was rooting for that man. Not so much for his best friend Coop, the judgmental, hypocritical man-child that he is, but Heck deserves all the love and happiness, and I hope he gets to have that with Guinevere. Sorry, I meant Angel Colby. God, she is stunning. Also, if a woman I was sitting beside on the plane responds with "I read books," when I tell her I'm writing a book, best believe I am marrying her immediately. Heck, you lucky bastard. Now, like I mentioned, cheating is a core part of this movie. And for a long time, as I watched this film, I found myself having to grapple with that. I am not a fan of it being utilized as a plot device in romantic comedies. Like, sure, I get what role it serves in the narrative is also a pretty common human experience, and art sometimes likes to reflect that. People cheat. It sucks, but it happens. And whilst I can accept it as something to be explored to certain ends in other forms of stories, with romantic comedies, however, I'm a bit hesitant because every time I find myself rooting for the romance between the main characters, I always have that voice at the back of my mind reminding me that this is happening amidst what should be a committed relationship, and nobody deserves, like really deserves to be treated that way. It isn't fair. I'm looking at you, wedding planner. Every time Luce and Rachel's eyes met and connected, the subtle brush of their hands against each other, for example, during H's school presentation, that entire imagined sequence that looked like it was a kiss, I found myself torn between swooning at it because, God, they look so good together. And in the next moment, my brain would be like, but shit, what about Heck? You need to come clean and tell him the truth, Rachel. This isn't fair. It kind of kept pulling me out of the story because I couldn't find myself completely enjoying watching the romance develop between Luce and Rachel, since I knew that she was basically emotionally cheating on her husband, her newly married husband. But then it hit me, and I remember the year in which this movie was released, 2005. Gay marriage wasn't legalized in the UK until 2013 and didn't take effect until 2014. That was 9 years after the release of this movie. What Imagine Me and You sought to show was to highlight how society's biases and its enforced cis heteronormativity meant that being straight was the default, and because it was the expected, a ton of queer women found themselves married to men as a result, which then meant that by the time they started questioning and coming to terms with their identity, shedding the compulsory heterosexuality that had dogged them and had been imprinted on them since they could remember, a lot of them came to that realization whilst already married and had to navigate that within said marriages. This movie, comedy though it is, explored that within the premise of a rom-com and ended with the happy ending, one that was realized via Rachel coming out and telling Ek the truth, and Ek, who is accepting of that even though he is devastated, not at Rachel falling in love with another woman, but at Rachel loving someone else, gender notwithstanding, because he loves her, but she doesn't love him the way he is in love with her, and he ultimately wants her to be happy, hence why he refuses to allow her to fall back within the comfort of their marriage and pushes her instead to chase after the woman she loves. As the credit rolled at the end of the film, I found myself wondering why I was more tolerant of the cheating storyline in Imagine Me and You than I was with it in My Best Friend's Wedding or The Wedding Planner. And that was when that realization hit me. It's a bit more tolerable when it's set within a queer storyline and narrative because there's a better reason for it, a justifiable reason for it. Heartbreaking though it might be, infuriating though it certainly is, some women do not realize that they are queer until much later in life, and that was reflected in Rachel's story, and is also the reason why Heck was so understanding even though he was also hurt, rightfully so. I mean, it's human for him to be sad that the girl he loves someone else, but it shows how good a person he is that he stepped back without being an asshole to her, because that is his friend even if she's no longer his wife. The same cannot be said to apply to Michael's piece of shit ass, who was aware that Jules liked him and, as far as I'm concerned, went along with it because it stroked his ego. It wasn't tied to his sexuality or any form of realized identity that he was made aware of later in life. He was just stringing along Jules because it really didn't occur to him. And before anyone wants to type some long comment about, well, technically, Nori and Michael didn't actually cheat on Kimmy. Like, sure, Jules kissed him, but she was the one who initiated it and not Michael. I will have to ask that you rewatch the movie and pick up on the subtext. Michael was actively flirting with Jules for a large portion of it and was emotionally cheating on Kimmy even before he committed. Jules isn't crazy. She did not pull that old shit out of her ass to imagine that her best friend might like her back. His ass kept giving her mixed signals for the years that they were friends right up until the very end. And also, Kimmy deserves better than to be married to a man who, because he travels all over the world for his work, meant that for their marriage to work, she would have to drop out of school just before her final year because her soon-to-be husband doesn't want a desk job. But I'm sorry I got distracted and spent too much time talking about my best friend's wedding when the focus should instead be on Imagine Me and You. Ultimately, we get our happy ending. Rachel tells Heck the truth. Heck figures out that the person that Rachel is in love with is Luce and sends her off with his blessings. And we have that iconic moment, to me at least, at the very end with the cars stuck in traffic. I know everyone's favorite bit in the movie is, "You're wanker number 9." And whilst I love it, especially with it being brought back at the very end, when that's how Luce knows that Rachel is calling for her in traffic, I was instead stuck on the messenger boy singing with his headphones, singing along to one of my favorite the Turtle song. Imagine me and you, I do. I think about you day and night. It's only right to think about the girl you love. I know the tide, so happy together. If I should call you up, invest a dime, and you say you belong to me, and here's my mind. Imagine how the world could be so very fine, so happy together. I'm sorry, hands down, absolute favorite scene in the movie. There is the music. There is Luce and Rachel meeting. Luce having the backbone and self-respect to insist that she wasn't coming back because she didn't want to be a secret. And then there is Rachel with the "You're wanker number 9" call to get her attention and have her leave the car, after which she tells her that she's ready, she's in, she's left Heck. She wants to do this. She can do this. They meet in the middle. They kiss. Lena Heady, Cersei Lannister, Jocelyn Fairchild, my love, she gets her happy ever after. She gets to walk into the sunset with the girl she loves. And I am in awe that in the post-credit scene, we get to see that they are still together, still happy. It's brilliant. It's beautiful. It's amazing. It's pride. The journey might have been messy, but by the gods, was it worth it? And honestly, I can live with that. I can also live with Rob getting hit with a sexual harassment lawsuit. But unfortunately, we do not get everything we want, and so his sleazy ass didn't get the comeuppance that he deserves. That is the only part that put a damper for me. A real shame. But of course, these are just my thoughts. I would, as always, love to hear yours. Whether or not you agree with me, please share them in the comments. Like this video, however, if you've watched this far and haven't done so yet, but enjoyed anything of what I had to say, share it so others can find my channel as well. Or you can check out my gaming or ASMR channels if they sound like something you might be interested in. I have them both linked in the description bar. I will see you tomorrow with a new video. Until then, do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.